Readus? Okay, redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
This one is to be excused?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You're
Thank
free to
you.
go. All right, next witness?
State calls Molly Carter.
Okay.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
All right, you may proceed.
Please state your full name for the court.
Molly Carter, Molllycarter.
What is your occupation?
I am a senior crime laboratory analyst with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in the Jacksonville Regional Operations Center in the biology and DNA section.
How long have you been with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
16 years.
What are your duties and responsibilities as a senior crime laboratory analyst in the biology section?
I examine items of evidence for the presence of body fluids such as blood, semen, or saliva. And I also can swab items or cut swabs for DNA testing. And then I analyze the results of those DNA testing and issue my findings in a report.
What is your educational background?
I have a Bachelor's of Science in Biology from the University of West Florida.
Have you received specialized training in the area of DNA testing and comparison and analysis?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about this training?
Yes. At FDLE, I underwent a two-phase training process. The first phase was primarily academic. I read a lot of literature, including journal articles and textbooks. I also tested numerous training samples, and I took written and oral exams. In the second phase, I worked actual cases under the supervision of a qualified analyst, and then I participated in a mock trial.
Is FDLE, is that an accredited lab in the area of DNA testing and analysis?
Yes.
What does it mean to be an accredited lab?
To be accredited, it means that we've met the standards of quality. And to do this, we have an audit where our policies are reviewed, our files are reviewed, our training program and educational requirements are reviewed, as well as proficiencies, and our logbooks and the files.
Have you ever been qualified as an expert in the area of DNA testing and analysis and testified as an expert in the state of Florida?
Yes.
Approximately how many times have you testified as an expert in this area?
I've testified 58 times.
Each time that you do a test and report a result regarding DNA analysis, is that subject to peer review?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what it means that your testing and analysis and conclusions are peer reviewed?
Yes, so each file or case undergoes a technical review, and that is usually done by another qualified analyst. And it's a complete review of the entire case file, and it's to ensure that all of the policies were followed during testing and that my conclusions match the results. And then an administrative review is usually done by a supervisor, and it's also to check for adherence to policy.
Is that a method of quality control for the testing that is done by your lab?
Yes.
Is it a generally accepted fact that everyone other than identical twins have different DNA?
Yes.
What is DNA?
DNA is a very large molecule found in all cells of the body except for mature red blood cells. And it's our genetic blueprint. It makes us who we are. So like it guides processes like digestion and also determines characteristics like eye color and hair color. And again, no two people have the same DNA except for identical twins. And you receive half of your DNA from your mother and half from your father.
So DNA varies from person to person, and when you are doing your analysis, you identify the difference in the DNA. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that would be the part that is unique to each person other than twins.
Yes.
Where is DNA found on the human body?
It's found in skin cells, blood, semen, saliva, bone, and hair.
Does it ever change in our lifetime?
No.
How does DNA get left on an item of evidence?
So DNA can be left on an item from handling that item, and the more you handle an item, the more likely you are to leave your DNA behind. And it also depends on the surface of the item. A rough surface, you're more likely to leave DNA behind, and a smooth surface, maybe not as much.
There are many factors and variables that may affect whether or not DNA is left behind on a scene. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you said, I think you already testified, that DNA is in blood. Is that correct?
Yes.
Also semen?
Yes.
If a person did not bleed at a scene but still handles an item, what type of DNA is being left behind, possibly on an item?
That would be your skin cells or epithelial cells.
Is there also variables in a person's ability to shed and leave skin cells or epithelial cells behind at a scene?
Yes, and there could also be sweating as a factor, which acts as a vector to transfer skin cells as well.
If somebody is wearing gloves, can that affect whether or not they leave DNA behind at a particular crime scene?
Yes, it acts as a barrier between the skin and the item.
And if somebody never touches an item or bleeds, then there is the unlikelihood that DNA will be left behind at a scene. Is that correct?
Yes.
What is known as a DNA standard or a known DNA swab?
This is a standard taken directly from a person. Usually it's a swab that looks much like a Q-tip, and it's used to swab the inside of the mouth to obtain epithelial cells from inside your cheek. And that is used to develop a DNA profile from a person that we can use as a known standard that we can then compare to question items or crime scene profiles.
What is STR DNA analysis?
STR stands for short tandem repeat. These are small segments of DNA, small repeating segments of DNA, and they're found throughout the body. And those repeats vary per individual, and that's how we can determine one person's DNA from another.
How is that process done?
So the first process is when we get an item in, we cut it and place it into a small tube about this big, and then it undergoes an extraction process. That's to get any of the cells off of the item and also to break open those cells and expose the DNA into the solution. And then the next step is quantitation. That's to determine how much DNA is in the sample, and that helps us with the next step, which is amplification, where we copy these areas millions of times, and that helps us read it better when we put it on a genetic analyzer, and then that genetic analyzer will give us the profile. It looks like peaks on a graph, and there's 21 areas plus 3 gender markers, and all of those 21 areas make up your DNA profile.
And when you take a known sample, you will see those 21 areas and the different peaks for each of the areas. Is that correct?
Yes, with 2 peaks at each area, representing your mother's contribution and your father's contribution.
And then an item of evidence, do you do the same thing with that, extract the DNA and then get those results to compare to the known standard?
Yes.
You mentioned that there are variables in whether or not DNA can be left behind on an item. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is DNA biodegradable?
Yes.
So whether it's blood or skin cells, that has the ability to degrade over time.
Yes, and there are factors that can affect that degradation, including sunlight, chemicals, humidity, and heat.
And what about items that have been washed or wiped away?
That's going to wash away DNA. There may be some left behind, but it can definitely wash it away.
So if somebody were to take a white rag or a white cloth and wipe an area down, that potentially could take any DNA away from that item.
Yes.
Each case that you work on at FDLE, do you assign a unique case number that corresponds to each investigation?
Yes.
Does that help you later be able to document and identify each case that you actually worked?
Yes.
Did you work on FDLE case number 2024-0403-556?
Yes.
And that is for the listed subject of Sean Gathright, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you personally know any of the subjects involved in this case?
I do not.
And does the information that is documented on the items that you receive at your office, does it list the type of offense,
Yes.
along with the law enforcement agency that submitted the evidence to your office for analysis?
Yes.
And who was the law enforcement agency in this case that submitted items of evidence for this specific FDLE case number?
That is the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
What items of evidence did your office receive in this particular case to review and conduct analysis on?
Our laboratory received wrapping tape from the handle of a rifle, buccal swabs from Sean Gathright, and buccal swabs from Isaiah Chance.
And those were the only 2 buccal swabs that you were submitted by the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, is that correct, to do this analysis?
Yes.
I'm going to start with State's Exhibit number 140. It's already in evidence. Do you recognize State's Exhibit number 140? And you can look on your screen in front of you. Do you recognize this item?
I do.
And how is it that you recognize State's Exhibit 140?
The yellow label is the FDLE label, and this tag here with the case number, item number, and the analyst initials is from FDLE.
And was there another lab technician at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in the Jacksonville area that actually opened the items and processed the items?
Yes.
And would they be responsible for documenting on this particular package the unique FDLE number, as well as initialing to indicate that they are the ones that received this package and opened and processed it?
Yes.
And do you recognize the initials of that person?
I do.
And who is that?
That's Leanne Grissom.
And is she another analyst assigned at FDLE to the biology section?
Yes.
And is that normal? What is the normal policy and procedure when a item of evidence such as State's Exhibit 140 comes into the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, your office, for processing?
We use a teams approach, so there may be someone that actually processes the item of evidence and obtains the samples for it to go through the DNA testing process. And then another analyst may extract that item, and then another analyst will analyze the data and issue the report. And then again, other analysts will tech review that file.
And is that what occurred in this particular case, that one of the analysts actually processed the items, but you received the data from the test and interpreted the results?
Yes.
And that is standard procedure at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
Yes.
And does each analyst properly document the unique case number to ensure that you are working on a specific item with regards to a specific investigation?
Yes.
And what process did the analyst in this case do to this particular item of evidence, 140, the wrapping tape from the lower rifle?
So the analyst observed an adhesive side and a non-adhesive side on this evidence, and she swabbed each side with separate swabs, and they went through the DNA testing process separately.
And so there are two samples, is that correct?
Yes.
And prior to that, had there also been received by your office States Exhibit 141, I apologize, the buccal swab of Sean Gathright?
Yes.
And again, taking a look at Exhibit 141, both sides, do you recognize this particular package?
I do.
And again, is there the unique FDLE case number?
Yes.
And is there the same documentation by the same analyst who processed the wrapping from the rifle?
Yes.
And you recognize the case number as well as the initials of the analyst who did the processing?
Yes, that's also Leanne Grissom.
And did Ms. Grissom do the same type of test on this particular buccal swab in order to obtain Sean Gathright's DNA profile?
Yes.
Did you then look at the results and the raw data of that test to interpret the DNA profile?
I did.
Was there, from States 141, Sean Gathright, was there a full DNA profile for all 21 areas that was obtained from States Exhibit 141?
Yes.
And that is a unique profile to the known person that was obtained to Sean Gathright, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you also receive a buccal swab from a known buccal swab from Isaiah Chance?
Yes.
Did the same process happen with that buccal swab where it was put in and extracted and then a full DNA profile was obtained for Isaiah Chance?
Yes.
And then going back to States 140, you said that there were two samples. One was from the adhesive side and one was from the non-adhesive side. Is that correct?
Yes.
Let's first talk about the swabbing from the non-adhesive top side of the tape, the wrapping tape from the rifle. Were there DNA that was extracted from the non-adhesive side?
Yes.
And what was the results of the DNA sample that was extracted from the non-adhesive side?
This demonstrated the presence of a mixture consistent with 4 contributors, including at least 1 male contributor.
What does it mean to have a mixture of DNA?
A mixture just means that more than one person left their DNA behind on an object.
And if you have a mixture, is it more difficult sometimes to pull out each individual contributor to the mixture?
Yes, it can be.
And in this particular case, you said that you had at least 4 people contributing to the DNA that was found on the non-adhesive side. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you then compare the results of the mixture to the full profile of Sean Gathright?
Yes.
What was the results of that analysis?
So Sean Gathright was included as a possible contributor to that mixture.
And then after you are able to include him as a possible contributor, do you then do a statistical comparison?
I do.
What is that called?
That's called a likelihood ratio.
What is a likelihood ratio?
So a likelihood ratio is a ratio of 2 probabilities that gives a numerical value that shows strength of support for one scenario over another. Namely, did the person of interest leave their DNA on this item, or was it an unrelated individual that left their DNA behind? So a likelihood ratio of 1 would mean that both of those scenarios are equally likely. And then the higher the number, the more support for the person of interest leaving their DNA behind. And then conversely, the smaller the number, the more support for an unrelated individual leaving their DNA behind.
And what was the likelihood ratio in this case when you compared Sean Gathright's full profile to that mixture obtained from the non-adhesive side of the tape from the rifle?
The observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Sean Gathright and 3 unrelated individuals than if it originated from 4 unrelated individuals.
So the strength of the likelihood is 700 billion times, is that correct?
It's greater than 700 billion times. This is a cutoff that we use for reporting purposes.
Once you get over 700 billion, you don't go further, is that correct?
Correct.
So you just report that it's greater than that. It's actually bigger than more than 700 billion times that it is his DNA that is in that mixture.
Well, not that it's his DNA that's in the mixture, but that the profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely if the sample originated from Sean Gathright and 3 unrelated individuals than if it originated from 4 unrelated individuals.
I understand. You're comparing the DNA profile, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And based on that, did you also, you said that it's a mixture of 4 or more individuals.
It's consistent with 4 individuals, yes.
Can you do a breakdown of the percentage of each individual that may be contributing to that mixture?
Yes.
And what was the breakdown for each individual? What percentage of their DNA profile is consistent in that mixture that was taken from the non-adhesive side of the tape?
So for this mixture, contributor 1 contributed 65% of their DNA to the mixture. Contributor 2 contributed 15% of their DNA to the mixture. Contributor 3 contributed 11%, and contributor 4 contributed 8%.
And who was the highest, the one that is contributing the 65% of the mixture to that sample, to that swab from the non-adhesive side of the tape?
Contributor 1 was consistent with the profile of Sean Gathright.
Did you then try to conduct an analysis or comparison to the known profile from the buccal swab of Isaiah Chance?
Yes.
What was the result of that comparison?
So for this comparison, there was not sufficient statistical support for inclusion or exclusion. So I couldn't make any determination of Isaiah Chance's contribution to that mixture.
And why is that?
Just the DNA types that appear. The likelihood ratio that I obtained was in a range where there could be false inclusion or false exclusion. And so when we validated the software that we used to calculate the statistic, we came up with this range, and the comparison of Isaiah Chance's profile to the mixture gave a likelihood ratio result in that range.
And does that mean that he could not, it's possible that he is not part of the mixture?
That's possible.
Does it also mean that he possibly could be a part of that mixture?
That's also possible.
There's just not enough information to say one way or the other.
Correct.
He cannot be included in that mixture
Right.
or excluded.
Correct.
Okay. Did you also do the same type of analysis and comparison with the adhesive side of the tape?
The adhesive side of the tape went through the DNA testing process, but at the quantitation step, it demonstrated that there wasn't enough DNA to process it further. So we don't expect usable results at a certain threshold of DNA.
And is that what happened in this case when the tape is pulled up, the sticky side that would have been touching the rifle, there was not enough information for you to do then further analysis to see if anyone's DNA was on that particular sample?
Correct. There was too little DNA in that sample.
Does FDLE have policies and procedures when conducting DNA testing to see for law enforcement to follow when submitting items of evidence?
Yes, we have an evidence submission manual.
And is that to give guidance to law enforcement to know which items they could submit to your office for testing?
Yes,
Is there also a limit that is placed on law enforcement of the number of items that can be submitted for DNA testing?
yes.
And why is that in place?
Because we want the most relevant items to a case to be submitted first, and because we have a very high caseload, so it makes for more efficient processing.
So for instance, if there were DNA swabs that were taken from a vehicle in which the assailant or attackers never entered, would you then test those items in order to determine identity of assailant?
No,
Why not?
because there's no relevance of that vehicle to this particular crime, and so we would not process samples from it.
For DNA purposes, is that correct?
Yes,
And so does law enforcement have to have a justification or a reason when submitting items to you to identify and analyze for DNA purposes?
yes.
Your Honor, may I have one moment?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time we pass the witness.
Okay, Mr. Gonzalez, any questions?
No questions, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Sonardi, any questions?
Very briefly, Your Honor.
Do you want any of these items up here, Mr. Sonardi? Do you want these items up here?
Good afternoon,
Good
Ms.
afternoon.
Carter.
Hi,
How many years you been with FDLE?
16,
Always in the biology section or different department?
always in biology.
Okay. And as I understand it, you were provided by the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office with some items to be examined for DNA, correct?
No, I received items from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
They came from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
Yes,
All right. And those items were basically a wrapping from the handle of a rifle
yes,
and a buccal swab from an individual, correct?
yes,
All right. And as I understand it, you examined that wrapping on the adhesive side and the non-adhesive side, correct?
Leanne Grissom did. She swabbed both sides separately. Yes,
All right, so you examined both sides.
yes,
And as I understood your testimony, you indicated there are a number of ways that individuals can leave DNA, correct?
yes,
Including me touching this podium right now. Is that one of the ways that I could transfer DNA that could be recovered later and examined by you?
it's possible.
All right. And saliva,
Yes,
perspiration,
yes.
any of the bodily fluids, correct?
I wouldn't say any of them. Maybe not urine,
Okay.
but saliva and sweat are good sources of DNA.
And also, when I'm saying touch the podium, that would be a transfer because of my skin cells being transferred, or would it be my bodily fluids, the bodily oils in my hand transferring the DNA?
Well, if we're talking about oils or sweat, then it's just a vector for the skin cells to transfer.
So I'm actually transferring skin cells, not necessarily my bodily oils, correct?
Yes,
And those are very easy to transfer and very easy to be later identified and or recovered, correct? If
not always. Sometimes we don't obtain results, and sometimes we do. There are a lot of scenarios that affect that.
all right, but they can be recovered, correct?
Not
Well-
again, not always.
Well, I understand that, but you did examine the adhesive and non-adhesive tape,
Yes,
all right, and you did locate what you identified as DNA on the non-adhesive portion of the tape, correct?
correct.
So DNA was located there.
Yes,
All right, so DNA can be located on a number of different substances by a number of different means, correct?
yes,
All right. Now, I also noted in your report on page 2, in examining the wrapping tape, which you identified as item number 7, there were possible hairs that you located on that tape?
Well, yes, Leanne Grissom did observe possible hairs on that item.
What, were there hairs or were there not hairs?
We're not experts in hair identification, so we refer to them as possible hairs.
Possible hair. It
Yes.
looked like hair to you.
Right.
Is that correct? After 16 years, can you identify hair?
I can identify if a possible hair is suitable for DNA testing, but I can't state that it's a hair.
Okay. All right. And why would that be important to identify a possible hair?
Because it's just the scope of the item and what she observed.
And that can also be tested for DNA, can it not?
If it's suitable for DNA testing, then yes, but there are definitely possible hairs that are not suitable.
Well, we don't know in this particular case whether or not that possible hair was suitable for testing or not, or do we?
Correct. They were not examined microscopically. They were just noted on the item.
All right. Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Okay, Mr. Wise?
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
One of the things Ms. Story left off asking you about was limitations on items that could be submitted to you by law enforcement. The limits we were talking about are actually limits on the number of items that can be submitted on each submission. Am I correct about that?
There are limits on the number of items, yes.
Yeah. But law enforcement can make multiple submissions to
Correct.
FDLE, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, when we're talking about, I mean, you gave an example of items that might not be, relevant for comparison in a particular case. But when we're talking about a first-degree murder case, any items that have potential value to an investigation can be tested for DNA by the FDLE. Correct.
There is some discretion involved. After the first submission, our supervisors can deny additional submissions.
And but that's something that would be, law enforcement could submit whatever they feel is appropriate, and if FDLE believes that some items may not be suitable, they would reject them, potentially, right?
Potentially, yes.
That didn't occur in this case, right?
Correct.
And ultimately, you as the examiner, it's not your decision to decide what should be tested, right?
Sometimes it is.
Okay, sometimes. In this particular case, did that kind of discretion come in play, or were you just testing what you were asked to test by law enforcement?
In this case, it was just what was submitted.
Now, the one item we've heard about today, wrapping tape from a rifle handle. You don't, I assume, know any information as far as like where that rifle was collected or what significance it may have to the investigation, right?
I do not.
And that's not really part of your job. Your job is to compare DNA profiles, right?
Sometimes it is important for us to know where an item was collected, but sometimes it's just straight DNA testing.
Okay. And in this case, it was just straight DNA testing, right?
Yes.
Now, the swabbing that we've heard about from the non-adhesive side of that tape, it has a mixture of 4 DNA profiles, correct?
Correct.
And the only DNA profiles you were asked to compare it against were Sean Gathright and Isaiah Chance's, correct?
Yes.
And you determined that of the 4 profiles, at least one was male, correct?
There, at the gender determining markers, there was indications of male DNA.
Okay. The other 3 could have been male, could have been female, is that correct?
Correct.
The DNA, any of the DNA profiles, but just take the DNA profile that was consistent with SeanGathright's DNA, you can't say when that profile would have been deposited on the tape, correct?
No, the DNA testing does not tell me that information.
Could have been the day before, could have been many, many days before, right?
Yes.
And you also can't determine how the DNA profile may have been deposited.
Correct.
Mr. Sonardi asked you about, for instance, if he touches this podium, his DNA may be on the podium now, right?
Maybe, yes.
Maybe. Lots of variables come into play, right?
Yes.
You're also familiar with a principle called secondary transfer, correct?
Yes.
And that is a means by which DNA may be deposited on a particular item when a person has never even touched it, right?
Yes.
And basically what that means, well, and to give a hypothetical, let's say So Mr. Sonardi was giving an example of touching the podium, and he's touched it here, and his DNA hypothetically is there. I've put my computer down here. His DNA very well may be now on my computer through secondary transfer, correct?
It's possible.
And in that scenario, Mr. Sonardi would have never touched my computer, correct?
Correct.
Another example may be you get off the stand, we shake hands, and then you go open that door. My DNA may now be on that door, and I've never touched it, correct?
It's possible.
And one thing, I think Mr. Sonardi covered this, but there were multiple potential hairs that were observed on the wrapping tape, correct?
Yes.
And they were neither removed or examined?
Correct.
Thank you, ma'am. That's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Petridis?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Now, we talked about the mixture, and you said 4 contributors. Is this a number that you found there, or you had to just put a number into the system?
I analyzed the mixture, and based on my training and experience, I determined that there were 4 individuals in that mixture.
Could there have been more individuals in the mixture?
I have to go by the information I have, and it looked like 4 individuals.
And when you put in the different numbers of contributors, that changes, I assume, the statistics you get out from the STR, correct?
Yes, that would change it.
So if you put in 5 or 6, the numbers you gave earlier would be slightly different,
It could be slightly different, yes.
or significantly different, possibly?
Well, we don't analyze anything at 5,
Okay.
so maybe 3 or 4, it could be somewhat different. I don't know that it would be significantly different.
You don't analyze anything 5 or more contributors?
Correct.
Is that a policy decision?
Yes.
Okay.
The software wasn't validated for more than 4 contributors.
Understood. And like you said earlier, your conclusion was not to include or exclude Isaiah Chance as a contributor, correct?
I could not include or exclude him, correct?
Is that because the sample was not good enough to test against Mr. Chance's sample?
No, it was just that the DNA types weren't sufficient to say that there was an inclusion or an exclusion.
And you mentioned a 700 billion number earlier for Mr. Gathright, but that's obviously not the only number you use. It could be a lot lower, correct?
Yes,
And so in some cases, if there's a chance that multiple people could have left the DNA, the number could be in the millions or thousands or even hundreds, correct?
correct.
And you didn't use any of those. You couldn't feel comfortable using any of those for Mr. Chance, correct?
Well, the likelihood ratio I got was not in the thousands or millions.
Okay, so it was lower then.
It was in the range, it was low. It was in the range that we use for not included nor excluded.
Okay, so you can't say with any degree of certainty that he left DNA.
No, I can't.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, redirect?
Just briefly, Your Honor. Ms. Carter, when you receive hears at Florida law enforcement, why are they not tested?
We can possibly test possible hairs. And it's always an option to go back to it and test it later if needed. But in this case, it was not determined to be needed.
Is that because you were able to get results from the item that was submitted by law enforcement? Is that correct?
Yes.
And when you're looking at hairs, are all hairs suitable for testing?
No.
And what makes a hair suitable for testing?
So when I'm looking at a possible hair under the microscope, I'm looking at the root end. And if there's cells attached to that root, or if it's in a certain growth phase, that means it would be suitable for DNA testing.
And when you are examining an item, or whether another analyst is examining items, are you examining and testing what you believe or that analyst at the time will give you the best source of DNA to compare to a suspect?
Yes.
And in this particular case, was it the swab that was taken directly from the tape that was surrounding the rifle?
Yes.
And you were asked specifically about whether or not you would look at mixtures involving more than 5 individuals. Is that correct?
5 or more.
And you do not do that because the software is not designed for that. Is that correct?
It has since been validated for 5, but we did not validate it at our lab for 5. So we stick to single source, 1 contributor, up to 4 contributors to a mixture.
And is that what the policy and procedures for what is part of your accreditation for the DNA analysis that you do?
Yes.
And then going back to the call that there are 4 individuals that are in that DNA, is that based on your training and experience looking at all of those 21 locations and 2 possible peaks for each individual?
Yes, I'm looking at how many peaks there are, and knowing that there's half from your mother, half from your father, and also considering that some people could have the same DNA types at areas, but overall they're not going to have all the same DNA types. And then the amounts that each DNA type contributed, those all factor into my interpretation of the mixture as 4 contributors.
And you were of that opinion that there were 4 contributors at least to this particular mixture obtained from the non-adhesive side of the tape?
Yes.
And when you're looking at, I believe Mr. Petridis asked you about that likelihood ratio and the percentage or the numbers increasing. When the individual that you said was it 64% who made up 64% of that mixture, Sean Gathright?
65%, yes.
65, thank you for correcting me. That is the person who you're able to do the likelihood ratio of the presence of his DNA profile is there was support for 700 billion times more likely. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that is based in somewhat part of the contribution of his percentage into that mixture. Is that correct?
Yes.
The less of the DNA that is in the mixture, then those numbers go significantly down.
Correct.
And when there is not enough of a person's DNA, you are in the position where you cannot say whether or not that DNA is truly included or excluded in a mixture. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, may this witness be excused?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You're free to go.
Thank you.
Okay, come on up quick.